Welcome in, ladies and gentlemen, to another edition of All Access AM. I am Billy Embody. Thanks for being here with us on this Monday as Miami has punched its ticket to the national championship game, beating Ole Miss, and Indiana killed Oregon in the Peach Bowl to advance to the national championship game. We will break down that game later this week. We will do multiple things on that game as Miami returns home to Hard Rock Stadium to face Indiana. They'll be the road team, but they did get that win over Ole Miss in incredible fashion. One of the great classic football games, I think, of the college football playoff era. And they get through it. They find a way and win the game with a touchdown in the final seconds. And of course, the game did come down to a heave to the end zone from Trinidad Chambliss, but Miami escapes with a 31-27 win to advance to the national championship game. Happy Monday, folks. I'm Billy Embody. We appreciate you guys being with us on All Access AM and waking up with us on this Monday. Please subscribe to the channel. That helps us a lot. Subscribe to All Access AM on YouTube. Scan the QR code in the screen that just popped up and join us on the channel. That helps us grow. We've seen it, continue to get rolling. We've unveiled kind of some new things we're doing with shorts and clips to try and get you guys to add some more subscribers to it and build out this thing. So we're looking forward to doing more of that in 2026. So lots of good things happening for us at All Access AM. And speaking of good things, when you give a call to Security National Bank and have them look over how they can help you hit your financial goals, that is always a good call. Security National Bank, a family-owned bank here, right in Dallas, and for decades across the country, helping people reach their financial goals. You can reach them at 402-344-7300 or go to securitynational.bank for more information on how they can help you reach your financial goals. Again, they started out as a family-owned bank, and they keep that same type of attention to detail that you'd expect from a family-owned business, and that's the cool thing about it. They grow with you and get to know you and your family and your goals personally and professionally and all of those different things to help get a better understanding of what you need, and that's that personal service that you expect. Founded in Omaha, Nebraska, right in middle America, and just an incredible story of growth. And again, goes back to that personal service that upholds the values that you want, not only your bank to have, but just people in general. So we encourage you to visit our friends at Security National Bank, securitynational.bank, for more on how they can help you with your banking needs. So getting my screen right there, but so we move on, getting things rolling here as my screen is all jacked up this morning. So let me try to fix that. There we go. I don't know what was going on there, but we appreciate Security National Bank for all their support, is where I'm going with all that. So let's get back on track here and get you broken down with Miami Ole Miss. This game was a classic. Miami up 17-13 at half, and we kind of thought, boring game, but close. Miami had opportunities. I kind of felt like I picked Miami by double digits, and man, if Miami had capitalized on a half of their opportunities that they didn't, they would have hit double digits. I mean, it wouldn't have been close, in my opinion, at least, but they didn't. And Ole Miss was hanging around in this game and was able to, score 13 points in the second quarter to get back into this game and really kind of, get this game, to where it was going to be, down to the wire. It felt like, Ole Miss was able to take a lead, and you're kind of sitting there after the first quarter and you're saying, man, Miami just had so many opportunities, so many, moments that they could have, found a way. They had self-inflicted drive killing, I think, just plays in general. You look at, calling a wildcat with Malachi Tony on third and short and getting stuffed. They just really could not help themselves, in a sense, get to that next level in this football game. And I think that was really something where you've got to credit Ole Miss and how hard they played and how hard they played throughout this playoff. But Miami just, that's going to be potentially the incredible thing about this Miami Hurricanes team. Last team into the field, but or last, at large into the field in a sense. But you have a Miami team that, throughout this playoff has had moments where they just haven't been able to extend that lead to the next level, or, take that next step to getting where they need to be to really just kind of, shut out an opponent completely. And it's hard in the playoff. Games are competitive. They had to go on the road against Texas A&M. They had to face a really talented Ohio State team. And then they face an Ole Miss team that, kind of playing like a team of destiny of sorts with this college football playoff. And, that's the type of fight that you'd expect from opposing teams. But penalties, and some of them were terrible. The Xavier Lucas ejection, just I don't know what targeting is. I really don't understand it. And everybody loves to scream about fixing it. I think the general intent of the rule, more often than not, is fine. And we're at the point where it doesn't necessarily impact games too often. Like there's not really many times where it impacts the game at such a level where they get a call wrong or they eject a guy or this or that. It's only rare moments, but man, they have to find a way to make this more of a judgment call from the booth. I mean, I don't know what that looks like. I don't know where that goes, but Xavier Lucas, and while I don't know if it was necessary for him to tackle the Ole Miss player the way he did, and it resulted in targeting and a hit to the head, man, that's just kind of like a normal football play. You know what I mean? There's no intent, there's no this, there's no that. And that's where I struggle with it. And so there's got to be a little bit more of the judgment from the booth. And maybe we get to a point where that is the best thing for the game. Like you almost wish that there would be, the NFL has the review on the fly and things like that. Man, if you could get the league to say, okay, penalty, or the referees to say, okay, penalty here. Here's why. Here's the penalty. Here's the flag. And then in mid time or real time, you can get kind of a review going in the booth or something, and the player be allowed to continue, because Xavier Lucas had no business being thrown out of the game. I mean, he had no business being thrown out of that football game. And so don't know what targeting is. And again, we appreciate Geo Kane 75 here. They have to let the kid play. I hope Miami and the ACC appeal that call and let him play. I agree. I mean, just for me, the whole point of the rule should be intent. It kind of a flagrant foul type of level to the targeting play and decision that they go into. And I'd rather it almost come, right then and there. And from the standpoint of, let's really look at the intent here. And I do not think that that was anything more than a football play that they determined, for whatever reason, that it had to be targeting. And so it nearly cost Miami. I mean, it really did. They ended up having to play Jabari Antoine, a kid that I covered in recruiting as a true freshman, and get some thrown out there in really difficult situations in coverage. And it's just unbelievable to see. And it speaks to kind of how hard it is to build depth in college football when you have somebody like a Jabari Antoine who's going to be very good and had his moments of being able to play well, but also got targeted on that 3rd and 8 and just a little early on the contact there. But man, when you're rolling out a true freshman, player right there, that's just kind of surprising. And Nick Saban even said, hopefully they get rid of that dumb rule. I agree. I mean, it's got to be changed. It's got to be changed to more of a flagrant foul type of approach. I mean, I don't even care about 15 yards anymore in a sense, but losing a player like that in a critical situation is really difficult to watch unfold. So That was targeting. That almost cost them. Trinidad Chambliss continued to cook in the second half. They was able to, lead that 6-play 75-yard touchdown drive to take that 27-24 lead. And Carson Beck gets the ball back gets the ball back in a little more than 3 minutes remaining in the game. And you're thinking, okay, this is the legacy drive opportunity for Carson Beck. Carson Beck's legacy drive opportunity hits home as he jogs it in to send Miami to the national championship game. And I thought Carson Beck did an unbelievable job all night of really feeling the pocket pretty well and being able to adjust and being able to get out and escape and make some of the plays extended. And Ole Miss got after Miami's offensive line with some sacks, and he felt that pressure too. And there were some that he couldn't do anything about. But I generally thought he moved around in the pocket well. He adjusted. He was able to extend plays, and the big touchdown to Keelan Marion was kind of a great feel where he was able to set his feet and throw the ball down the field and get a huge touchdown for Miami and put them, again, back on top in what was kind of a wild the wild second quarter with some scoring as that put them up 17-13. But that was a huge play in the game. And, Carson Beck just didn't make any of the mistakes that I think, you would have thought he would have made, against an Ole Miss defense that was so aggressive. They have a defensive line that I thought was, the toughest that Miami really faced this year for the most part, as far as top to bottom depth and talent. You could probably make the case for Ohio State as well. But, the way that Ole Miss defensive line plays, that really was a tall task. They have some freaks that some of the other teams don't have in the middle there. And Miami was able to grind them out and make them tired. And at the end of the game, when they needed that scoring drive, Carson Beck and the Miami Hurricanes delivered. And they go down the field, 15 plays, 75 yards. They get a face mask call that extends the drive, which is the right call. It's right there. Jalen Braxton grabbed the face mask, turned his mask there. And then from there, they're kind of able to just dink dunk, get down the field, convert some third downs, and do some of those things. I thought Shannon Dawson was in his bag on that game-winning drive. Thought he was able to, get the ball in the right playmaker's hands. How cool would it have been for Malachi Tony to make that sick one-handed catch actually a catch? And you could argue it was, but I do think in terms of the spirit of the toe tap, they got it right and they were able to convert and move on. But I think, watching Carson Beck manage that drive was worth every penny that they paid him in NIL, for this 1 year. And, he's able to score and, just kind of a perfectly executed run drive. And then from there, Ole Miss did have some fight left in them. But, I think, a lot has been made, especially from the Ole Miss side, about the no pass interference. I mean, a lot of the time you're kind of grabbing each other. And I know it was kind of egregious in a sense, I think, as a defender in a normal play, but that's not a normal play. That's a Hail Mary. That's one last chuck to the end zone. And for me watching it, I thought it was just two players, battling for the ball. Again, a lot of contact. There was a lot of opinions that there should have been pass interference. We see that a lot in Hail Mary situations. A lot of grabbing, a lot of holding. And, the officials had already kind of made themselves a part of the storyline enough. I think that factored into it as well, which it shouldn't. But that Hail Mary, I think it was the right no call in that scenario, just with what we had seen, throughout the game and not wanting the officials to kind of be that story at the end. But then again, Ole Miss would have had another 20-ish yard play to run, of course, and they still would have had to score because it's not a spot foul. But anyway, Miami survives. They win 31-27, and they advance to the national championship game. Miami total yards, 459 yards on this Ole Miss defense. Just outstanding job. 268 yards from Carson Beck. You get 191 yards on the ground, another 100-yard rushing game by Mark Fletcher. and Ole Miss was limited with Kewan Lacey out, and they still hung around. 10 penalties, 74 yards for the Hurricanes. That almost bit them. They had some really critical ones. And yes, the wide receiver, there's a ton of like hands all over the place, everywhere. And again, I think a play like that, you just no call. I think they did the right thing as a whole. Trust me, I'm team no penalty there on the Hail Mary to the end zone. But Miami, they lose the turnover battle on a tip ball that's picked off by Kapina Gushkin, a really talented, do it all kind of safety for Ole Miss this year. And again, that was kind of a drive where you're looking at it and you're like, okay, will that come back to cost Miami? But didn't. That was a drive that was cooking. They were already 13 plays down the field, getting ready to knock into the red zone. I mean, shoot, that could have been a 20-play drive if not for a tip ball, and ends up in the hands of Ole Miss. So Miami has some things to clean up. Mario Cristobal, I do not think, and this is how he is. And if you watch late into the night, like I did on SportsCenter, Scott Van Pelt, he was not happy. He was not a happy camper in a sense, because he knows what's left, and he operates that way. He knows they've got to go 1-0 and do all the cliche things to beat Indiana on Monday night next week in Hard Rock to secure a national championship. And watching his demeanor post game was so different. I felt like than the Ohio State game. I think he knows that Miami didn't bring their best stuff from a technical standpoint. This was kind of a step back for Miami in terms of, I think, how technically sound they were, in terms of how just really well they played from a fundamental standpoint. And that's encouraging. That's the encouraging piece, is Miami is going into this national championship motivated to play a better game, because they didn't bring their best stuff against Ole Miss, and they were still able to come away with the win. And you hope, if you're a Miami fan, that point gets across this week in practice, and they're able to really start to hone in on those finer things like penalties and some of the little things that didn't allow them to really open this game up and make it a double-digit win, because that's what it felt like watching it, is that Miami should be up double digits the entire time, but they couldn't get that done. So really, really good execution on that final drive to get that game-winning drive across the finish line and push them to the national championship game, where they will face Indiana. Indiana dominates Oregon. We're not going to break down that game. This is an ACC podcast. We appreciate you guys. Please hit the subscribe button if you are an ACC fan. Do that for me on our YouTube channel, All Access AM, please. But as ACC fans, you got to be excited for what Miami has now brought to the table for this league. I mean, this is a massive deal. Miami's going to get another $20 million. Good for them. And they're getting that all, that's their total. And if they win, I think they get a little bit more. But just, so they get that. But also now they have delivered what is pacing to be the most expensive ticket ever for a national championship game, as the get-in price has been hovering around that $3,400, $3,700 mark. Just incredible. And to see these two teams face off, between Indiana having such a massive fan base and Miami playing at home, this is insane. I even saw Luther Campbell, Uncle Luke, had to tweet out, he has no tickets. Don't ask him. He has no connection. You are on your own for this national championship game in Hard Rock. So what a story this could be. We talked about it last week. Miami can win this game. They can punch their ticket to something that is really cool and really special. So we will see that Monday night. And one quick crazy story, but Ole Miss freshman Bryce Fitzgerald was robbed in a post-party celebration, as robbers came into the Airbnb party that they were at and came in with rifles and robbed people, took jewelry and all those things. So glad everyone's okay there. But hey, maybe the U is still back in that regard. But what a scary situation. So I'm glad everybody's okay there, as Miami was, of course, celebrating. They had a little bit of time off between that one as they flew back from the desert that night and got into the transfer portal as well. For the staff, they had to land, get off the plane, and get that rolling. So we will break down some of that transfer portal scoop and news in just a moment here. But of course, I do want to remind you guys that we are also presented by our friends at Corporate Magic. Corporate Magic is an incredible company that can make your dreams come true when it comes to major events. And whether it is a national sales meeting at an incredible level, or a concert, or a global broadcast, or streamed event, Corporate Magic has the team that brings decades of experience to every project, combining planning, design, and technology to keep your audiences fully engaged. Whether it's that dramatic staging, dynamic content, or the precision needed for live TV, Corporate Magic delivers with accuracy and care. So go to corporatemagic.com. And when you talk with them, mention All Access AM and tell them that we sent you, and say hello to them, because they have produced events that you've seen and you just don't know it. So visit corporatemagic.com to learn more. Continuing on All Access AM, we appreciate you guys being here. So please hit that subscribe button to our YouTube channel, All Access AM. We have a lot to talk about in the transfer portal. A lot of notes on my little notepad that I use to plan the show here. And I will say this: Carson Beck versus Fernando Mendoza is the matchup we're going to be watching most closely on Monday night. I don't want to hear anything else as far as who the biggest matchup is. That's it. Whoever can put the team on their back and step up to the plate and deliver is going to capture the national championship. And the Carson Beck we saw against Ole Miss, pretty close to what is needed. And that's the difference. There are two different levels here for these quarterbacks as far as what they need to hit. The Fernando Mendoza that showed up against Oregon, I think that's the Fernando Mendoza that Indiana needs to hit. And I don't know if we're going to see that from Fernando Mendoza. And this is a bad time to start doubting him, and I'm not. But that was such an elite clip of a level. It's going to be fascinating to watch and see if that Indiana offense is able to operate at the efficiency that they did against Oregon. Meanwhile, Carson Beck is going to face a really talented, opportunistic, high motor Indiana defense. And he's got to not be the storyline in this game. He's got to manage drives. He's got to manage his team. He's got to keep them on the right pace as far as avoiding the penalties that have killed them. And if he does that, if he pulls the strings and gets to that kind of 250-ish yardage mark and kind of do what they did against Ole Miss, they're going to be hard to beat, because it's going to be hard to see them committing some of the same penalties and issues that they did, because I think Miami is going to be super fired up, just like Indiana. But I think Miami is going to be, I said this last week previewing the game. I said, this is the moment for Miami where it feels like you're trying to, win a game 6 to send it home to your home, court, home, whatever, to win a game 7. And now that you're here, you see the moment, and you see that opportunity, and you could go out and take it. So we'll see, obviously, how that goes. We'll preview the game next week, or this week. But Miami, Carson Beck, they're locked in too. And it's not just Fernando Mendoza and the Indiana Misfits, as he calls them. So lots to talk about on that game. We'll do a bunch of that this week as the national championship is set. Portal news. The transfer portal is incredible. It is great cinema for college football. We saw that with the Washington situation, with Damon Williams ending up back at Washington, retaining good legal counsel to tell him, hey, this is stupid. Go back to Washington, say you're sorry, do all those things. They did that. Damon Williams stays at Washington. The College Sports Commission, which is supposed to be a major piece of this NIL regulatory effort, did release guidance that the third-party deals that are being done have to have more juice to them. They have to have more meat. And here's the thing, there are schools that are allegedly going to hear from the CSC this week. And the problem is, and this was kind of released last week uh, around the Brennan Sorsby recruitment with LSU, you're getting deals that are being offered at, let's use Brendan Sorsby, $3.5 million. But there's no, okay, you've got to be at this place at this time, and you've got to do this tweet, and you've got to spend this amount of time doing commercials for so and so brand and this and that brand. There's none of that. And the CSC is like, well, wait a second. You can't just have these open ended NIL deals with these partner companies that then come to fruition years from now or don't come to fruition. Basically, no show jobs for these players to earn NIL. And that is why some of these agency agreements or services agreements are getting so out of hand. And we'll have Ross Dellinger, who reported on this for On Three Sports, on at some point to talk a little bit about this. He monitors this really closely. But these third party deals, it's really difficult to watch them come together because there's an open endedness. So shocking, the colleges that are skirting this are some of the well-known ones about it. We've seen them. And for these athletes, it's puts an incredible amount of pressure obviously on them to accept the deal when they're at that level. But it's also just fascinating to watch it just be so brazen, and it impacts the rest of the transfer portal, because I don't think we're incredibly far off with the transfer portal and it operating the way it maybe needs to. But what is happening is the money is getting to such another level because these schools are signing agreements for these kids, and the kids are signing them too, where they don't have any, they don't, there's no responsibility to actually hit it. You have a partner media company. Playfly Sports is the one that was listed in the LSU agreement, and they're just supposed to secure $3.5 million in NIL deals for Brendan Sorsby. And what that looks like, who knows? But that's the agreement that then gets shot through to the clearinghouse, and it's like, whoa, whoa, whoa! Wait a second. There has to be direct activation. There has to be, what is he going to do? That all has to be listed and broken down. So that's where, one, either schools are going to have to take it up to the next level where, okay, you have your partner, but your partner is going to have to be involved in signing said player. And hey, Brendan Sorsby, you're now the quarterback at LSU. Here's what we're going to get you with. We're going to get you with Raising Cane's, and that's going to be $1 million of your deal, and that's going to be the mother load of it. And then we're going to get you with a walk-ons, and we're going to do a walk-ons deal with you. And then we're going to have the car dealership in town. And it's going to be all these different separate pieces that add up to $3.5 million, which then have to be approved with all the direct activations. And you have to do that in the portal when guys are taking 4 visits in 5 days. I mean, it's still a joke in that regard, but that's what it needs to be if it's going to be at that level. So the portal is wild. Cam Coleman committed to Texas, and a lot of people talking about, I mean, $4 million, an insane level. We'll see kind of what comes out from that. But you have such an issue with some of these deals being signed where it's just, hey, yeah, we'll commit that to you. We'll commit that. That's fine. That'll get pushed through. That's something that it's going to be really interesting to see how all of that plays out, and which schools get reached out to by the College Sports Commission to kind of get this right and get it back into the right spirit that it was originally put out there for. Because, man, if you're asking me what needs to be done, NIL, and this is where they can't put the genie back in the bottle, but they should. NIL needs to be rolled back to the collectives and kind of operate it how it was. And here's the thing, the big brands of college football got upset with how a Texas Tech, with how some of these schools were operating with their collectives. SMU, when SMU was rolling with their collective, like that was a huge deal. And all those schools got upset because they were able to just raise money and then have these kids represent their collectives and represent their schools in a sense. And they just had to raise the money to make it happen. They did. So then when they get it to this point, now the money has jumped up another level when they opened it up more to these partner media companies and things like that. And it was much calmer in a sense when you just had the collectives going at it and trying to organize, basically marketing for the school through collectives or through charitable organizations. But because we went all the way to, hey, well, we don't want them doing no show jobs and kind of doing some terrible charity work for, $150,000 on one day. Well, we've got to stop that. Let's get the media companies involved. That's where it's all now. There are no show jobs in a sense. So it's broken. It's got to get fixed. And that's for another day on how to fix it. But that has led to a wild portal window. And we've seen some ACC schools really step up. But let's lead off with Miami. And Miami is right in the middle of the Sam Levitt sweepstakes, trying to get the former Arizona State quarterback to be their quarterback for the upcoming season. He did visit Miami. He did arrive in Coral Gables, and he took that visit. And now everybody in the country, it seems like, is awaiting a decision from him. LSU is a top contender. He did take a visit to Tennessee, where Lane Kiffin visited him in Knoxville, allegedly, before he took the flight down to Miami this weekend. So not much information coming out of that camp on that regard, but they are keeping it, very, very close watch on that for Miami. And Miami's in the quarterback market with obviously Carson Beck, having his eligibility exhausted. But they weren't done, getting transfer portal additions. They did land former West Virginia wide receiver Cam Vaughn. They did land others, but former West Virginia wide receiver Cam Vaughn did commit to Miami out of the transfer portal. He had 541 yards, 4 touchdowns last year. He was a preseason All Big 12 third team pick, and he led the Mountaineers in receiving yards, receptions, and receiving touchdowns. So he upgrades his situation, and then they get South Carolina transfer, who was the second leading receiver for the Gamecocks. They got Vandravius Jones to join the fold. 32 receptions, 548 yards, and 4 scores. Who wouldn't want to get out of the South Carolina offense? Let's be real here. But they did take it another step forward, and they're continuing to now get in the mix for some major names. And another one that they landed is one that I'm really high on in the portal: Boston College DB Omar Thornton. He had 111 tackles, 11 and a half tackles for loss, 2 sacks, 1 pick, a pass breakup, and 5 forced fumbles over 2 seasons for BC, and had 4 forced fumbles alone in 2025. He is a American Heritage product, so down in the South Florida area, and a really talented prospect out of the high school ranks, who I believe will have 2 years of eligibility remaining. So a really nice piece for the back end to pair with Bryce Fitzgerald, who we talked about earlier on the pod, a really talented true freshman for Miami. Miami is going to start loading up, making their moves in the transfer portal, and getting things on the right track there to rebuild this program's just talent level that they're going to have to do after this season ends. So they had this little weekend visit. They had some guys on campus, and they got a few commitments out of it as well. So Miami starting to heat up in the transfer portal. We'll see who their quarterback is. That'll be the biggest thing to watch. Speaking of quarterbacks, Virginia quarterback Chandler Morris denied his 7th year of eligibility by the NCAA. He joins Trinidad Chambliss in getting bad news this weekend from the NCAA, but they did decide to deny it. Tony Elliott, Cavaliers head coach, said that they were trying for it, and now it's been denied. Morris does plan to exhaust all of his options to appeal this, to fight this, to do all of those things. But you'd expect at this point that Chandler Morris's career at the college level is over at this point. And truthfully, his playing days are over. I'd be shocked if he was drafted. Maybe somehow gets a training camp invite, but it does not seem likely. He had a huge season for UVA this year. They were able to go to the ACC championship game and get a spot there, but they couldn't get it done. Duke wins it. An incredible final season for him of college football. I know there was some kind of buzz around hoping that Chandler Morris would end up at Clemson with his dad, Chad Morris. Not to be. So Chandler Morris does add UVA into the fold as far as looking for a transfer quarterback, and UVA is looking for that transfer quarterback in Bo Pribula, visiting Virginia as well. As far as his transfer recruitment, it's been pretty robust. Tennessee's been involved, a couple of other schools, but 10 games this year, threw for 1,914 yards, 11 touchdowns, 9 picks. He's pretty mobile. He ran for 297 yards and 6 scores. He was hurt this year at times, but at Missouri, just didn't live up to what I think he was going to, what I thought he was going to be this year. And again, injuries have some things to do with that, but Bo Pribula did visit UVA over the weekend, right before the dead period. So he did get that visit in. And I think this is a huge deal for UVA. If they could get him, that would be absolutely massive. Schools like Georgia Tech, Tennessee, Washington, Virginia Tech, all involved there with Bo Pribula. And we'll see. I as an aside, the ACC does a really nice job of spending at the quarterback position. I think we've seen that. We've seen that with Miami. We've seen that with SMU. We've seen that with Louisville. We've seen that with schools across this league. Darian Mensah, of course, at Duke, who's going to be the number one passer coming back in the ACC right ahead of Kevin Jennings. You have an investment in that position. And I think that is in part why this league is so difficult and why coaches talk it up as being difficult. And I think that's where you've seen a lot of poor offensive play out of the SEC that doesn't challenge some of these defenses like it used to. And we're seeing that, stand out in that regard because you have to defend so much when you face talented quarterbacks day in, day out in this league. And it makes it really difficult to win. That's why Jaron Keelwis-Sagapatelli can lead, Cal past a Louisville or past an SMU. That's why you can see, Virginia Tech, if they can get the right guy in there, make a move, because we just watched it with UVA getting Chandler Morris in there, make a move this year. So it is such a league that's predicated on quarterbacks that stress out defenses and makes it hard to defend. So whoever gets a guy like Bo Pribula in this league, if Georgia Tech can get him, if UVA can get him, if Virginia Tech can get him, it's good for the league. And Georgia Tech did host Bo Pribula as well. And they are working on trying to get that lined up. I don't know if he actually made it, I'll be honest, but I know that was reported on last week. So they're in the mix for him. We'll see kind of how that goes. But the quarterback position continues to be one that teams address. North Carolina quarterback transfer Bryce Baker did commit to Virginia Tech, so they do have somebody on board. He was a freshman who didn't see any action as a former 4-star prospect, top 100 player, and was pretty productive as a senior in high school. So they do add Bryce Baker into the fold from North Carolina for that quarterback position at Virginia Tech. And Virginia Tech did get a pretty talented pass catcher for their future quarterback, with Duke receiver Keyshawn Brown committing to Virginia Tech after spending 2 years with the Blue Devils. 105 receptions, 1,291 yards, 7 touchdowns over the last 2 years. So a really productive receiver in that Duke offense. And, he's going to have 2 years of eligibility remaining. Pretty cool deal for Virginia Tech to add that type of a player. Bad deal for Duke to let him get away when you have Darian Mensah coming back. So there's all this battling for different players all over the place in this league, and it makes it really difficult. And we see the transfer portal continue to make it tough on these teams to keep guys and to really lock them in for multiple years. And look, we've got 4 more days of guys being able to enter. And it's going to be fascinating to see who enters on that last day, who got kind of the push to get in the portal and make some money and make a move. And, some of these ACC schools are investing. So it wouldn't shock me if we see some strong finishes across the transfer portal with the league. Penn State tight end Luke Reynolds also committed to Virginia Tech. So they're going to have another talented player as they take a former 4-star, I believe, top 100 prospect away from the Nittany Lions. In 2024, he was able to make 4 starts over the course of that college football playoff team run. Just 9 catches, 11 yards that year. But in 2025, 13 games, 7 starts, 267 catch, or that's wrong. 200, it's got to be wrong. He had 257 yards. He had somewhere in the range of 30 receptions or so this season. But he moves on to go reunite with his former coach, James Franklin, in Blacksburg. So another nice piece there for Virginia Tech. Virginia Tech isn't the only one that was busy, though. Louisville has made quite the splash in the transfer portal so far. They were able to really rack up some high-end talent, and it's going to be interesting to see how all of this plays out with a first-year starting quarterback in Luke Keinholz. This was the hand-picked guy by Jeff Brom to succeed Miller Moss at the quarterback position. And when you look at Louisville, after taking kind of a hot name at quarterback in Miller Moss, who this podcast wasn't overly high on, you now have somebody who has upside, who is going to grow with your program potentially. And that is going to be incredible to watch, as they did get former Vanderbilt wide receiver Trey Richardson, who's a really, really talented player who had 46 catches, 806 yards, and 7 touchdowns this year for the Commodores, played in all 13 games with 12 starts. Really nice pickup on the offensive side for Louisville, but they weren't done. They added North Carolina edge rusher Tyler Thompson, beating out SMU. He had 26 tackles, 7 sacks, 8 tackles for loss, 2 forced fumbles in 2025. He will have 2 years of eligibility remaining, I believe. So a really talented pass rusher heads off to Louisville, and they also continued to address the offensive side of the ball with Hardley Gilmore, the 4th, committing. He was a wide receiver for Kentucky this year, 28 receptions, 313 yards, and a touchdown. Great ad by Vince Marrow, who came over from Kentucky prior to joining Louisville right before the season. So they had a nice piece there. And Montavian Quisenberry, another former Kentucky player, joining the Louisville program with Vince Marrow rolling over there to join that program, making an impact. So nice slot piece potentially for Louisville's offense to bring in there. So Louisville has invested. Louisville's made a move in the transfer portal, and they're continuing to make it a priority to retain guys. They got Isaac Brown back. They got AJ Green back, one of their defensive ends. They've made a nice run over the course of this transfer portal to make these moves happen and to start building that team up. And we'll see how it goes, though. It's really difficult to kind of quantify just how good Louisville's going to be with some of the losses that they had. And you think, okay, well, is that guy going to be as good as Chris Bell or Colin Lacey or what have you? And they've lost some of their depth at running back with Duke Watson going out the door. So, and they'll have a first-year starting quarterback. So Louisville doing their best to build around them and build that up. So we've got more transfer portal intel to pass along as well. We will do that in just a minute, but we want to announce again that Sportsmo, our friends at Sportsmo, the app, is now available to contribute to your favorite college program through women's basketball, men's basketball. You can do this for all teams across the country. You can make your micro pledges for 3-pointers, for wins, for losses, for blocks, all of these things you want to bet on, quote unquote, on your college team, you can do through the Sportsmo app on college basketball now. So a great new addition. We encourage you guys to hit the link in our podcast episode description page and download Sportsmo today and start supporting your favorite college team right now.
Sportsmo lets you make a more direct impact on the game because it lets you, the fans, fund your favorite college football teams in a straightforward way. In a you win and I'll give way. In a I need you to show me your running game is alive and then I'll donate way. These real-time tax-deductible microfunds lead to impact your team can feel. Every cent you send mixes with every drop of sweat they put in. Form your squad. Boost your friends when a play comes through. A new way to follow the game. And cha-ching, your favorite team. So what do you say, difference makers? Ready to power the play? Sportsmo. Download today. Let's smo.
All right, we do have more transfer portal news to break down. North Carolina added former offensive tackle, Arkansas offensive tackle, Jaquan McRoy. He was a just massive prospect, 6'8", 370. So they add some girth, so to speak, up front for North Carolina on the offensive line. Tar Heels weren't done, though. They did lose linebacker Mekhi Gabor to the transfer portal, and he has been in Nebraska, and he spent the spring of 2025 with Missouri. So pretty wild, but did add 41 tackles, 2.5 tackles for loss, and a sack this year over 12 games. So they lose some linebacker depth to the portal. And then they did continue to upgrade the offensive line with Rowan Burns signing with North Carolina, former Clemson offensive lineman who played just 2 snaps in 1 game across his redshirt season in 2025. So actually a nice young piece that they can develop and hope that they break out this year for them on the offensive line. And former Texas tight end Jordan Washington also committed to North Carolina. Kind of a big deal on this one. 12 games for Longhorns, 7 catches, 109 yards, and a touchdown. He was pretty highly touted and regarded. The tight end position is a really one that is hard to land some talent. And North Carolina did that. Jordan Washington, kind of a high upside guy as far as talking with people who are recruiting in the transfer portal. That was somebody who was on a lot of people's lists. North Carolina defensive tackle Dontre Robinson did commit as well, or did enter the portal as well, leaving North Carolina. He transferred to North Carolina from Florida ahead of this year. He did make 12 appearances this year, 39 tackles and a forced fumble. Big dude. I covered DeAndre's recruitment out of high school. Texas was involved, and LSU and all sorts of major programs. And he ends up, committing or entering the portal again here. So he's on the move, and just kind of the day and age we live in, man. Some of these guys are just going to keep entering and keep moving schools and doing all these things. So it is just a crazy world, honestly. Third school and third year is what Dontre Robinson will be on. You look at Florida State here, and Florida State is also another team that is seeing some guys leave for the portal. Earl Little Jr., sorry, Canes fans, left for Ohio State. So a brutal blow there for them to lose Earl Little Jr. They did lose offensive lineman Joshua Raymond to the portal. It was a former Vandy transfer. Depth offensive lineman Kevin Wynn, defensive lineman, entered the portal. He was just a true freshman this season and did play in 4 games as a redshirt this year, but looking for a place where he can play more. And speaking of playing more, Carson Hobbs did commit to Florida State, Notre Dame transfer, spent 2 seasons in South Bend and had 7 tackles, 1 PBU, and a pick for the Irish. And then Auburn transfer Xavier Chaplin heading to Florida State. He started all 12 games at left tackle for Auburn this year. So really nice pickup for Florida State on the offensive line as Herb Hand brings in a player from a program he's very familiar with. Georgia Tech landed Alabama edge Noah Carter. So joins another former Alabama person in Atlanta, joining Georgia Tech. He played in 11 games this past season for Alabama, mainly in a reserve role, 9 tackles, half tackle for loss, 2 quarterback hurries for the Crimson Tide. They add some talent to their defensive line room. Clemson defensive lineman Caden Story did withdraw from the portal, so Dabo Swinney bringing somebody back. He played in 5 games for Clemson this year, 7 tackles during that time, so maybe didn't get the right situation. But the Tigers did add former SMU running back Chris Johnson Jr. into the fold. Explosive running back, can now come in and play in that Chad Morris offense and kind of be like a Braden West, maybe, for those SMU fans watching. They were able to get him on board and make a major move, getting a proven-ish ACC running back into that Clemson running back room that needs a lot of help, as Adam Randall leaves, and they needed to upgrade that room. So they bring in one of the fastest guys in college football in Chris Johnson Jr. So lots of other portal news. I'll just say also SMU was able to get kind of back on a little bit of streak here. They picked up former Florida State tight end Randy Pittman and former Texas A&M tight end Theo Mellon Orstrom. Two really impressive tight ends that SMU completely revamped their tight end room with now. Big deal to get both these guys. These were pretty much their two top targets, as Randy Pittman was on campus for an official visit late in the week and committed to the Mustangs. He had 23 receptions for 208 yards and 2 touchdowns in 2025. He also carried the ball as well over the course of his career, which included a stop at UCF. So some versatility there in this Rhett Lashley offense. And then Theo Mellon Orstrom, former Texas A&M tight end who's from Sweden originally, 6'6", 257 pounds, picked SMU over Houston, Kansas State, and Auburn. This is his final year of eligibility. In 2025, he caught 19 passes for 168 yards and 2 touchdowns, or 168 yards and a touchdown this year. So 2 big tight end moves there for SMU. And they were able to, add a couple of others as well into the fold that will be, I think, happening early this week as we get into it. But they did add an FCS All-American kicker in Nick Reed, so they addressed those needs there as well. So as we get to the final bit of this morning's pod, let's take a look back at ACC basketball from the weekend. Pretty good weekend for the ACC. SMU, let's start there. The top 25 matchup of ACC teams. SMU took on Duke in Cameron Indoor, their first trip to Cameron Indoor as an ACC team. They did so without Boopy Miller. Boopy Miller out with an illness. Sam Walters, another rotational player, was out with an illness as well. Duke comes away with an 82-75 win over SMU. SMU jumped out to an 11-0 run lead right off the bat. It's kind of like, holy cow, how is this happening? Duke was able to fight back in that one and retake the lead, and they never gave it up. SMU got within 3 at various points in the final minutes of the game, but they just couldn't push through. They made a couple of key errors, and they fall. SMU did drop 2 games on their road trip at Clemson, at Duke, but a really, I think, different story than what we saw last year in Andy Enfield's first year, where they went to North Carolina and they faced somebody else too. And it was just, they led off with Duke at Moody and then went on the road and faced North Carolina. And those were 2 blowout poor losses. This time around, they kick off 2026 beating North Carolina, and then they go play a tough game against Clemson, just fall short. Same thing with Duke without Boopy Miller this time. So signs of steps in the right direction. SMU's on in that world of being a tournament team, and I think they're playing. They learned a lot about themselves on this trip, and at the same time, Duke, being able to do what they did and continue to keep that thing rolling, just shows just how powerful they are. I think. I mean, they're headed towards winning this league. They were able to beat Louisville last week, top 25 team, 84-73. So they got that win on the road and continued to push this thing in the right direction. So Duke is looking like another really strong Duke team, and they just really, really impressed with them. UNC edged out Wake Forest on Saturday as well. A lot of questions around what North Carolina does with the point guard position right now and how they get that fixed, because, this Wake Forest team comes into the Dean Dome and, sitting there coming in at 10-6 and 1-2 in ACC play. And they gave North Carolina everything they could have wanted. So they've got some things to work out as far as the point guard position, and they really took their foot off the gas against Wake Forest, and it almost cost them. So North Carolina was building a big lead, but they took their foot off the gas, and they nearly blew it. Louisville did get a win over BC, 75-62. Nice 13-point win at home there. UVA hosted Stanford and won 70-55 on Saturday. Miami beat Georgia Tech. You had NC State putting up 113 points on poor FSU. Syracuse 83, Pitt 72. Virginia Tech edging out Cal 78-75. So both West Coast teams coming over to the state of Virginia and not getting it done. Tough deal for them. Clemson 76, Notre Dame 70. Clemson 76, Notre Dame 61. And then we do have a fun little Tuesday night here with a top 25 matchup, at least as of right now. The AP poll hasn't come out. Virginia heading on the road to face Louisville, 6 p.m. on ESPN2. That's Tuesday night. Miami at Notre Dame, 6 p.m. ESPNU. Boston College at Clemson, 6 p.m. ACC Network. Florida State at Syracuse, 8 p.m. on the ACC Network. That's all Central Time. We appreciate you guys being here with us on All Access AM. Let's get to the chat as well as we close this out, and remind you guys, please scan that QR code in the corner of your screen and subscribe to All Access AM. It just doesn't take anything. Just subscribe, helps the channel grow. We appreciate all of you guys who are here with us Monday, Wednesday, Thursday, live, 7 to 8 a.m. Central Time, 8 to 9 a.m. Eastern Time. And we have always a fun time on this show, I can tell you that much. But let's get to aviation. He thinks the FSU tight end is going to be a stud on the Hilltop. I would agree. I think there's a world where Randy Pittman is a really quality replacement for RJ Maryland. You see that production go up from that position. Theo Melleman-Orstrom, freaky athlete. He obviously fits into the Matthew Hibner role for multiple reasons. Tom Riddell, I wanted Ole Miss to win given the Kiffin mess, but Miami winning is the best thing for college football as a whole. Shows the committee got it right. I have a lot of friends that work at Ole Miss, and man, this was just such an incredible story that was trending in the right way. And I was really torn because you want your friends to do well, but you also want the league that you cover to do well too, because it just makes everything more enjoyable. I could say that, but that I could see a world where plenty of people would have wanted Ole Miss to win and just kind of stick it to Lane Kiffin. That would have been unbelievable if Ole Miss would have won the national championship and Lane Kiffin would have been sitting in Baton Rouge. I mean, just cinema. But I agree. Shows the committee got it right, putting Miami in, and similar to my comments about, hey, targeting needs to be a little bit of a judgment call, like make it a true, hey, is their intent? Let's just get this right instead of worrying about flags, ejections, whatever. Let's figure that out. That's where the committee, the eye test, man, don't sleep on the eye test. I just think the eye test for the committee, their reasoning is always horrible. So they might have gotten it right, but the eye test for Miami and how they played down the stretch was very, very strong. So it's clear the committee paid attention and got it right. How did SMU beat Miami? Yeah, a lot of Mustang fans asking themselves that. That comes from Johnny Jackson, the Emperor. And of course, because Carson Beck never throws only one interception. How SMU doing in the transfer portal? Good, I hope. Johnny, we covered that a little bit. I think, and by the way, Johnny, Isaiah Horton was in the portal and SMU didn't look his way. Rob Likens actually recruited Isaiah Horton at Miami, and he ends up at Alabama through the portal as well. But they were in contact. Let's just say they already had their guy, and Isaiah Horton is going to get millions from Texas A&M. Pretty crazy stuff there. And I think that's, again, you can sign these open-ended contracts that, just deliver NIL without any form of, hey, here's what you got to do. We're almost at the Rhett Bomar days at this point of, certain players signing these deals, and there's just nothing on the other end of it as far as what they have to do. So it's kind of crazy. But I think SMU is at the point in the portal where, and And here is the issue that I think SMU is running into. SMU has, number one, invested and will continue to invest in recruiting the high school ranks. And for those of you who think that's not the way to go, one, look at Miami. Okay, yes, they've gone out and grabbed a transfer quarterback. They've gone out and grabbed some transfer pieces, but that team is built largely on high school recruiting. Don't forget that. Don't let some of the buzz around what Miami does from a spending level in the transfer portal make you guys forget about that. And they do it at a high level. Well, SMU is working on doing that and putting that in the right direction. And so what do you have to do? You have to retain those players and you have to make sure that they stay in your program. Otherwise, you're going to end up like, I don't want to say like Texas has, because Texas has seen some of their top talent be retained. But look at Texas right now. Okay. Texas has lost Bo Barnes to Kentucky. He was a 5-star on three. He was a huge piece of their 2025 class. Gone. Highly paid player. Then you have Kalik Lockett, or not Kalik Lockett. You have sorry, I'm getting to the right page. You have Jamie French, who entered the portal, another highly touted guy who's leaving the program. You have there were a couple others. I mean, they've just seen a lot of like their key young talent leave. They've also retained some of them when push came to shove, and they were able to get them back in the boat. But it's just a weird thing when you pay up that much in recruiting. You've got to play these guys early, and you've got to get them on the field, or else you're not going to get your money back. And SMU is now, like, this point, this season, you're going to see all those 2025 guys play that they signed. The wide receiver position is littered with talent. You're going to see the 2025 running back, Jermico Green, play at a high level. You're going to see the offensive line see Draymond Odoms and Abel Hoopy and some of those guys. You're going to see Tyron Polley take that step as a safety. You're going to see JVN Holiday and Zay Gentry play as corners. You're going to see some of these other players like a Jalen Shivers in that class play. And so that's that retention. That's that retention of young talent. And so the portal is impacting how the staff views its roster, I think. That class is impacting how SMU staff views the roster as far as the portal goes. Because I thought throughout this year, from what I was told, you'd see SMU go out and grab multiple offensive linemen. You'd see them go out and completely revamp, obviously, their defensive line, which they have. They've gone out and revamped their defensive line, but they're still a step away from being where they need to be at the same time. But because of how their roster has been built at certain positions through the high school ranks, it's impacting how aggressive they're being in the transfer portal. So keep that in mind as you go through it. But I think they're doing fine. Like, they've addressed the tight end position. They're going to address a couple other positions that are key. They've gotten 2 difference-making defensive backs that fit their system well. So I think they're doing well. They're not going to make that splash, I don't think, that a lot of people would have liked. Although, I think splash is a relative thing. Like, Tyler Thompson would have been their splash. It also would have meant that they probably don't get to address a couple other positions because he's a 7-figure guy. So it's a hard world to be in right now. And SMU is just, they're doing what they can, but they have a really good roster that they feel like should win 9-10 games at minimum next year. They feel like they have a team that can be back in Charlotte. Last question, we'll get out of here. Tom, what is the future of the bowl system? Is it on the way out? I have no idea. If they expand the college football playoff, I think we'll see some more bowls die off. It'll be interesting to see kind of how all of that works. But I thought this was, because of the calendar getting right, I thought this was the best bowl season we've had in a minute. I think teams need to obviously treat them differently. You really do need to treat them like, hey, let's play our young guys. Let's do this. Let's do that. Let's make sure they get that time so we find out what they're all about, and reward them for being on the practice squad this year, or doing this or doing that. So, this is quite the world that we live in, I guess. The calendar, NIL, bowl games not mattering, having zero impact really as far as how your team is viewed. That is the bowl system we live in. So I don't know what the future is. I don't think they have really anything that they can do. I mean, the only thing is bowls can pay players more to play in the games and make them more competitive. But that's all you're going to get is them to play in the game. It doesn't mean they're better. It doesn't mean this. Doesn't mean that. But that is quite the thing. So, look, we appreciate all of you guys being here on this All Access AM. Thank you guys so much for subscribing to the channel. We appreciate you guys being here, and we hope you guys have a great week. The national championship game is set. We'll talk a lot about Miami over the course of the next week, of course, and we'll get into some ACC hoops breakdown later this week as well. So thanks for being with us on All Access AM. I'm Billy Embody. Have a great Monday, everyone.